Hey, this is Joe Hubbard from JoeHubbardBassVideos.com coming at you today with another lesson. And this is the fourth lesson in my jazz improvisation course, Creating Jazz Lines. This particular lesson is on the minor 7 flat 5 chord. So with that in mind, grab your bass and let's get started. The minor 7 flat 5 chord is harmonized from the second degree of the natural minor scale and the harmonic minor scale. Now, its most common function is working as a 2 minor 7 flat 5 in a minor key area, but it can also be looked at as a 7 minor 7 flat 5 in a major key area. Now, this is the equivalent of the 2 minor 7 flat 5 within the relative minor key. So if we had the key of C major, the 7 minor 7 flat 5 would be B minor 7 flat 5, and the relative minor of C would be A minor, and the 2 minor 7 flat 5 would be the B minor 7 flat 5 as well. So this is an important concept because when we are working with harmonic analysis, that 7 minor 7 flat 5 and the 2 minor 7 flat 5 can really be used as a pivot chord between either a major to a minor key change or a minor key change back to a major key change. At this point, let's take a step backwards and go back and review the 2-octave minor 7 flat 5 arpeggios. I want you to do them in every key, but let's start with C. Here we've got this 1, 4, 2, 1, shift, 3, 1, 4, 3. And you really want to work on this seamlessness from note to note, so you get this really sounding smooth when you go up and down your fretboard. Always pay attention to the attack and decay principle. This means that when I attack the note, I need to be mindful of its decay and that it has a seamless connection with the next note that I attack. This is very important, and a lot of guys don't do this. A lot of guys attack it, then move to get to the next note, and they ghost the decay so you don't hear the full length of the note. Here's where you can really practice that. This is a great exercise. Just hold the note. When I hear it's just beginning to decay, I go to the next note. When I hear it beginning to decay, I go to the next note. When I hear it beginning to decay, I go to the next note. Now here's where this becomes hard because that wasn't too bad, but going from that note to this note in that shift is pretty hard not to have a little bit of a gap there. Hear the decay, you go to the next note. It's a boring exercise, but it really develops this principle. Here, here. Again, we might hear a little gap. There's a little gap there. It's always when it's that slow, when you have the shift, you're usually going to get a gap. If you don't, it's just a bonus. But then when I develop that, you see here, it almost sounds to the listener like there's no gap at all. And it develops this smoothness and fluidness to your playing. So what the characteristic sound is for the minor 7 flat 5, of course, is the flat 5. You need to be able to tell the difference between this chord and any other chord. If you A-B this between a minor 7th chord and this minor 7 flat 5 chord, you'd hear instantly that characteristic note is the flat 5. So minor 7th would be here. Minor 7 flat 5, there it is. You really want to get that sound into your head. Also want to understand that the minor 7 flat 5 chord is used mostly as part of a minor 2-5-1 cadence. Sometimes you have it as a static chord. There's some jazz tunes that have that. Inner Urge by Joe Henderson is a good example where it's a minor 7 flat 5 chord for 4 bars. And it's good to practice them because you know, it's great ear training to learn the sound of this chord because you don't often hear it. And just to sit and work things out. What we're going to be getting into, of course, are the rhythmic and the melodic convolutions that we've been doing in previous lessons, and then we're going to apply over the minor 7 flat 5 structure. We're going to begin this lesson by breaking down the broken arpeggio exercise number 1, just like we've done in all the previous lessons. Now at this stage, I really need you to understand the formula of this exercise. All we're going to do is apply this to the structure of the minor 7 flat 5 chord, which is root, flat 3, flat 5, flat 7. I'm going to break it down to those 3-note inversions, and we're going to have the root, flat 3, flat 5, okay, flat 3, flat 5, flat 7, flat 5, flat 7, root, flat 7, root, flat 3, root, flat 3, flat 5, and then the flat 3, flat 5, and the flat 7. Notice this produces a minor triad, and that's above this diminished triad here. That's a nice sound, those two triads there, that close together. Okay, if I play this in succession, this is what I'm going to have. Okay, so what happens here is we need to again emphasize the importance of counting. Remember, we can count through this. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. If that's still a little too difficult for you, or just because you've got the new structure with the flat 5 that's a little tricky with the fingering, then count it with the subdivision. So I go 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1, 2, 3, 4. So if that's just a little bit too hard, maybe what you want to do is introduce this exercise by playing it in triplets first, using that as a stepping stone into playing it in 16s. This is in triplets: 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet, 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet, 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4. So get this together. I want you to play this over those minor 7 flat 5 chord pad drones. This is a good way to get the sound into your head. You just hear the pad sound. All you need is a keyboard. By now you probably got all that set up. And play this very slowly. You can play it out of time. I'll give a few examples of how that's done. Come back after you finish getting that down, and we'll move on to the second exercise. We're going to take a look at is the broken arpeggio exercise number 2. Now the same instructions apply as covered with all the previous chord types that we've already done. We're just going to make this fit over the structure of the minor 7 flat 5 chord, which is again root, flat 3, flat 5, flat 7. We start on the flat 5 and we're going to play our descending 3-note inversions. So I've got flat 5, flat 3, root, flat 7, flat 5, flat 3, root, flat 7, flat 5, flat 3, root, flat 7. I'm going to shift up, flat 5, flat 3, root, and then flat 7, flat 5, and flat 3. So successively, this is what I've got. count it, and we got to stress the importance of counting. I'm just counting the pulse. It's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. If I find that a little bit too difficult, I might want to try just counting the 16th note subdivisions first. So it goes 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1, 2, 3, 4. Then if I still am finding it hard to play this in 16ths, maybe it's just because I've got this new chord with the flat 5. That dark characteristic of the chord may make it tricky to hear in the beginning. I might want to play it in triplets, and just to use as a stepping stone to get to the 16. So that's going to go 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet, 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 4 triplet, 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4. Okay, so I want you to get these together, play these over the minor 7 flat 5 chord pad drones. This is a great way to get all this stuff together. Come back and we'll move on to the next exercise. Exercise that we're going to cover is the diatonic approach note from above exercise. This is going to be exactly the same way that we've done in the past with all the other previous chord types. The corresponding chord scale that's going to be used is the Locrian mode. It's not the only scale we can use, but it's the one we're going to start with today. So I've got the root, the flat 2, the flat 3, the 4, the flat 5, the flat 6, the flat 7, and the root. And I'm in C, so I'm playing C, D flat, E flat, F, G flat, A flat, B flat, and then C. So what you really want to do with these scales in relation to the chords is identify those chord tones as notes in the scale, and then look at the notes that are missing, and those are going to be your diatonic approach notes. Now you're also going to have the root as an approach note, because the root approaches the flat 7. So what we have is we have the flat 2 approaching the root, the 4 approaching the flat 3, the flat 6 in this case approaching the flat 5, and then the root approaching the flat 7. And this is what we're going to have. Into the first group of 3 notes, we have flat 2 into the root. Then we have 4 into flat 3. Okay, then we have the flat 6 into flat 5. Then I have the root into the flat 7. Then I shift up and I have flat 2 into the root. And then 4 into the flat 3. So what happens is that I've got this. Okay, so what I want you to do with this is really understand how this fits with this scale. Really break it apart just like I've done, and make sure to highlight the chord tones. Then look at those scale notes that are left over. They're going to be your approach notes leading into the first note of each 3-note group. next exercise, which is the chromatic approach note from below exercise. Now again, this is exactly the same way that we've done these exercises so far, so you should really be getting used to the formulas for each one of these. But if we take our descending three-note inversions, what we're doing is we're placing a chromatic approach note from below the first note of each three-note inversion. Sometimes they're diatonic to the scale. Sometimes they're not. It doesn't really matter. It's the whole chromatic thing gives a certain flavor, a certain dynamic to the notes, and because of the way it resolves. And the idea is that it doesn't matter if they're diatonic, because you're resolving to a chord tone. You're not resolving to the chromatic approach. That's an important concept to really get down and understand. And you'll start hearing music this way. And if you start analyzing a lot of jazz things, a lot of people are playing just in this way. Good exercise is to take the Charlie Parker Omni book and start going through that and seeing all these chromatic examples that he uses all the time. And this is one that he employs amongst many other jazz players. So what we have is we have this first three-note group. So I'm going to do the chromatic approach from below, and that happens to be diatonic to the scale, to the Locrian mode that we're working with, okay? The next one goes into the flat 7. Now I'm not going to use this one, and the idea is that a lot of people want to use their chromatic approaches on a single string. Sometimes it just doesn't work and it gets a bit funky, the fingering, okay? So from here, I want to go across adjacent strings, okay? And I want to sort of get this idea, because look at how that sort of maintains a particular economy of motion that I've got with my position. So there's the chromatic below the flat 5, the first group. Chromatic below the flat 7 is here, and that's non-diatonic to that scale, okay? And then we've got chromatic below the root, okay? Again, that's non-diatonic, okay? Chromatic below the third, non-diatonic. Chromatic below the 5th, okay, which is diatonic, and then we shift up, chromatic below the 7th, okay, and that's non-diatonic as well. So if I play this successively, this is what I end up with. Okay, so get this together, learn to play it over that minor 7 flat 5 chord pad drone. This is a great way to get this stuff together. Come back and we'll do the next exercise. Exercise, what we're going to do is combine the previous two exercises with the diatonic approach note from above exercise going ascending, and then playing the chromatic approach note from below while descending. It's the same formula that we've done for all the previous chord types, so this should be pretty straightforward by now. So let me just go through this with you. So here it is going up. Then coming back down. Okay, so what I want you to do, practice this over the chord pad drone, get this down, come back, and we'll do an after action review. just about wraps up today's lesson, but before we go, let's talk about what we've learned. In today's lesson, we've learned the importance of focusing on chord tones versus scale tones. We've also learned how to embellish the minor 7 flat 5 chord tones both melodically and rhythmically. We've learned how to create ready-to-use lines that you can immediately apply to your bass lines and solos over a minor 7 flat 5 chord. And we've also learned how to practice these lines effectively over the minor 7 flat 5 chord pad drone. As always, practice smart, work hard, and play creatively. I'll be checking in with you next week for lesson 5, so take care.